She vanished without a sound, from a house no one could enter and a room no one could leave. Her gown was still warm, her scent still lingered, but she was gone. And what she left behind would destroy empires. In the brutal summer of 1874, the French quarter of New Orleans sweltered under a heat that felt more like a curse than a season. The kind of thick, suffocating air that made even ghosts sweat. On July 2nd, just before dawn, the most whispered name in Louisiana high society vanished from her private bedchamber without a single witness, footprint, or scream. Her name was Annabelle Duval, wife of shipping magnate Lucien Duval, a man so powerful he was rumored to own judges, generals, and ghosts alike. When the chambermaid entered the bedroom at 6:00 a.m., she found Annabelle's silk nightgown laid out on the four-poster bed, as if carefully prepared for burial. The perfume of rose water still clung to the air. The balcony doors were locked from the inside. The hall guards, both armed, swore on their lives that no one entered or exited. Yet Annabelle was gone. Not kidnapped. Not murdered. Gone. As if the walls had swallowed her whole. Newspapers called it the Silent Lady Scandal. But that was a lie, because behind the velvet curtains and French lace of Annabelle's disappearance was a secret 41 years in the making. A pact signed not with ink, but with blood. And a woman who dared to expose the society of men who had used their wealth to rewrite the laws of man and God alike. You're not just watching a mystery. You're stepping into a vault of forbidden memory, where each revelation cuts deeper than the last. This is not a story about love. This is a story about power. And what happens when the one person you're meant to protect discovers the cost of your empire and tries to burn it all down? So ask yourself this, and ask it honestly. What would a man like Lucien Duval trade to silence the one soul who knew his truth, his fortune, his name, or perhaps his own wife? Lucien Duval was not born rich. He was forged in the mud, blood, and plague pits of antebellum New Orleans. His mother died giving birth. His father, a failed physician turned gambler, vanished in 1842 after losing the family home in a crooked poker game held inside a brothel church run by former Confederate officers. By the time he turned 15, Lucien was already orchestrating trade deals on the docks of the Mississippi. Not with ledgers, but with knives, bribes, and a charisma that made killers call him Sir. He was the kind of man who could speak Latin to a priest and Creole slang to a dockhand in the same breath. By 1861, while the nation burned in civil war, Lucien Duval was already rebuilding the future. One stolen body, one rigged contract, one dead rival at a time. His shipping empire began with cotton and tobacco, but quickly turned darker. Rumors circled like vultures, missing cargo manifests, ships that arrived with half their crews lost at sea, illegal arms shipments to private militias in the Caribbean, even whispers of human trafficking masked under the label indenture. But no one dared ask questions, because Lucien Duval wasn't just rich, he was untouchable. His marriage to Annabelle Laurent in 1870 had been hailed as the grandest union the city had seen since before the war. She was 22, educated in Paris, fluent in 4 languages, with eyes the color of storm water and a mind that men underestimated at their own peril. Her father was a French banker with blood ties to Napoleon's exiled court. Her mother was Creole royalty, descended from voodoo queens and sugar barons alike. To society, their union was perfect, beauty and power, grace and ambition. But inside the Duval mansion, the towering 3-story estate at the edge of Chartres Street, a different story unfolded. One of growing distance, locked rooms, whispered arguments, and beyond. The long absences Lucien never explained. Annabelle was no fool. She saw what others didn't, and in the final months of her life she began keeping a journal, written entirely in code. That journal, when decoded, would later expose a secret society so entrenched in the foundations of America it still echoes today. They called themselves Les Veilleurs Noirs, the Black Watchers. And Annabelle Duval had just declared war on them. It began with a ledger, Tucked behind a false panel in Lucien's private study, sealed in wax, and written in a cipher that only a multilingual scholar could hope to decipher. Annabelle found it by accident, or maybe it found her. Late one night, while her husband attended a business supper at the Louisiana Yacht Club, she wandered into his office, drawn by something she later described in her journal as a whisper beneath the silence. The book was wrapped in dark leather, embossed with a symbol she didn't recognize at first, a serpent devouring its own tail, surrounded by 13 stars, one for each of the founding bloodlines. At first glance, it looked like a shipping manifest, dates, cargo, destinations, but Annabelle's education was sharper than most. Within hours, she realized what she held wasn't about trade. It was a map of movement, not of goods, but of influence. Hidden beneath the names of ports and products were references to ritual gatherings, locations marked with symbols instead of names. Some entries were nothing but initials and numbers, others referenced seemingly unrelated deaths, a plantation fire in Baton Rouge, a train derailment in Shreveport, the suicide of a senator's wife in Savannah, all connected, all timed, and always followed by a small note written in red ink. Debt paid. The deeper she read, the colder her blood became. This wasn't just a record of crime, it was a ledger of sacrifice. Every death was an offering, every accident a transaction. Annabelle didn't know it then, but she had just stepped into the machinery behind the mask, a vast, generational power structure rooted in ancient European blood cults, repurposed by Southern elites after the Civil War. They weren't content with money, they wanted permanence, control of time, history, human legacy itself. She spent the next 3 weeks decoding the ledger by candlelight, one page at a time, hiding it in the floorboards beneath her writing desk. She kept another journal, written in French, chronicling her discoveries and suspicions. She no longer trusted the walls, or the mirrors, or the servants. But she never told Lucien, because she had learned enough to know he wasn't just part of the Black Watchers. He was their high priest. Annabelle's world began to unravel, not in chaos, but in eerie symmetry. Every piece of her daily life, every gesture of kindness, every polite conversation at parties, now reeked of surveillance. The cook who always knew her preferences, the maid who arrived exactly when she wept alone, the driver who never asked questions. She saw them differently now, as watchers, as handlers. It was as if the house itself had eyes. Her once idyllic bedroom became a cell. Ornate, yes, but inescapable. She tested every lock, every latch, every hidden corner of the mansion. The estate's walls were thicker than stone. They were stories, stacked upon stories. Histories rewritten by men like Lucien, who controlled not just the land, but the memory of it. At night, she began hearing strange noises. Not the usual creaks of an old house, but low hums beneath the floorboards. Footsteps where no one walked. Whispers through keyholes in languages she did not know, or that no human throat should ever shape. One night at precisely 3:33 a.m., she woke to find a shadow standing at the foot of her bed. No movement, no sound, just a form darker than the dark, and eyes, not glowing, but aware. When she lit her candle, it was gone. But the smell remained, like damp earth, like old parchment and burnt hair. She began to suspect the Black Watchers were no longer hiding in codes and contracts. They were here, in her home, testing her mind, softening her grip on reality. That week, she attended a gala with Lucien. Photographs of her from that night show a ghost in emerald silk, pale, withdrawn, her hands clutching her locket like a talisman. That locket, she later wrote, held a single hair from her deceased sister, a girl who had died mysteriously in childhood and whom Annabelle had long suspected was sacrificed by her own father during a healing ritual. The night of the gala, Annabelle didn't speak. She observed, and she saw them. 13 of them, men and women scattered through the room, none interacting, all watching Lucien from different corners like sentinels in a silent chess game. 13 watchers, 13 stars, 13 bloodlines. She now knew the truth. She had married the devil. But what terrified her more was how calmly he wore the mask of a man. 2 weeks before her disappearance, Annabelle made a decision that would seal her fate. She wrote to an old friend, Father Matthias Bellamy, a former Jesuit scholar turned exorcist, once exiled from the church for attempting to publish a book titled The Hidden Thrones, Bloodlines, Possession, and the Southern Elite. The book had been suppressed before printing. The manuscript vanished. But Annabelle had memorized excerpts in school before it was banned, and now every line made horrifying sense. She sent him a sealed letter by private courier, marked only with the Latin phrase, In tenebris veritas. In darkness there is truth. She begged him to come to New Orleans, not for confession, for war. What she didn't know was that Lucien already knew. The Black Watchers had eyes in every pulpit, every confession booth, every seminary. The letter was intercepted. Bellamy never arrived. Instead, a man named Dr. Basil Crow came to visit under the guise of a medical consultation. Tall, emaciated, with fingers like crow talons and skin that looked embalmed rather than alive. He examined her for precisely 12 minutes, asked no questions about her health, and then, before leaving, placed a single object on her writing desk. A ring, not hers, not Lucien's. A ring bearing the same serpent emblem as the ciphered ledger, but this time coiled around an eye. When she picked it up, she swore it twitched. Annabelle wrote that after that night, time began to bend in her presence. Clocks ran backward, candles burned cold, her reflection blinked when she didn't, and once, just once, she saw herself sleeping in her own bed, from across the room. Reality was cracking. Because the Black Watchers didn't just control money and death, they controlled perception. They had mastered a form of psychological alchemy, using ritual trauma, hidden symbolism, and calculated disorientation to collapse the individual's identity and rebuild it in their own image, a mental weapon more potent than any gun or law. Annabelle understood what they were doing. They weren't just trying to silence her. They were trying to erase her, from memory, from history, from reality itself. She had only one defense left: her journal. She began signing every page twice, once in her own name and once in a name she claimed was older than birth. That name has never been decoded. Not yet. On the final day, Annabelle was seen alive. The sky over New Orleans turned a color no one could name, not gray, not blue, something closer to bruised velvet, as if the heavens themselves held their breath. That morning she was calm, too calm. The servants noticed it first. She smiled more than usual, touched every banister as she descended the stairs, ate her breakfast slowly, methodically, eggs, toast, and black coffee, nothing more. And then she asked for a glass of milk. She hadn't drunk milk in over a decade. At noon, she locked herself in the parlor and played the same piano note over and over for 11 minutes. C sharp, the same key noted in her journal as the pitch of awakening. When she stopped, the house fell so silent, the butler claimed he could hear the breath in his own ears. At 2:17 p.m., she handed the housekeeper a sealed envelope addressed to "Whoever dares remember. It has never been found." By 4 o'clock, she had vanished. There was no struggle, no signs of escape, no broken locks or footprints, just an open window, a faint trail of salt across the floor, and a strong scent of jasmine and sulfur, the signature scent she wore since her wedding, and the odor associated with ritual conjuring in West African voodoo, which she had secretly studied under the guidance of a Haitian housemaid named Isolde, a woman who vanished herself weeks before. Lucien claimed Annabelle had gone mad. He told the press she had retreated into delusions after a bout of illness and had likely wandered off barefoot into the swamps. A tragic romantic ending. The public mourned. Obituaries were printed. Her portrait was draped in black velvet. But privately, Lucien was furious. He had lost control of the narrative, and worse, he suspected she had hidden the ledger. To this day, it has never resurfaced. Rumors spread quickly that she had faked her death, that she'd He had been taken by the Black Watchers for knowing too much, that she had transcended, becoming one of them, or worse, something beyond even them. Some say she walks the French Quarter at night, veiled in green, whispering forgotten names to children and drunks. Others say she left behind a final cipher, burned into the pages of her journal with invisible ink, one that predicts every major political shift of the coming century. But one thing is certain. From the day Annabelle disappeared, Lucien was never the same. By August of 1874, Lucien Beaumont was unraveling. Not publicly, of course. In the press, he remained the grieving widower, generous, composed, tragic. He donated to orphanages, funded hospitals, even commissioned a stained glass window in Annabelle's memory at St. Agatha's Cathedral. But those close to him knew something was wrong. His eyes had changed, no longer sharp and calculating, now sunken, twitching, constantly scanning corners. He stopped sleeping, he stopped eating, and he began whispering to himself in strange tongues, guttural, rhythmic, almost liturgical. He was seen pacing the cellar at all hours of the night, clutching his cane like a weapon. The servants reported screams, not of pain but pleading, as if he were begging something in the darkness to listen. Then came the fires. 3 warehouses owned by Lucien mysteriously burned down within a week. Arson, the papers said, but no culprit was ever found. In each case, a single phrase was scrawled into the ash near the ruins. The debt was not paid. Lucien's fortune began to vanish. Banks closed their doors to him. Contracts dissolved. Foreign investors pulled out without explanation. It was as if someone, or something, was systematically erasing his empire. He grew paranoid. He fired half his staff. The remaining half wore black gloves at all times, by his command. He claimed fingerprints could summon things. He had mirrors removed from every room, claimed they were listening devices. Even the garden was dug up, the roses torn from the roots. But the worst was yet to come. Lucien began seeing her, Annabelle, not as she was, soft and elegant, but as a hollowed thing. A shade in green silk, her face blurred, her locket open, and in place of eyes, burning circles of light. She would appear in his study, in his bathwater, reflected in silver. He screamed at her, begged her of, feared her gold, servants, blood. But she never spoke. She only watched. And when she vanished, something else remained in her place. A smell, that same awful scent, jasmine and sulfur. Lucien locked himself in the mansion for weeks. No visitors, no staff. Just endless, feverish writing. He filled notebook after notebook, hundreds of pages, none of it legible. Symbols, spirals, maps of places that did not exist. Instructions for rituals no man should know. And then, one morning, the front door was found open. Lucien was gone. His cane remained in the doorway, snapped in half. A single word had been carved into the mahogany paneling in something that looked like bone ash. Ouroboros. The mansion stood silent for 23 years. No buyers, no squatters, no looters. Real estate agents refused to enter. Surveyors claimed their instruments went dead near the cellar. One priest, sent by the diocese to bless the property, reportedly vomited blood upon stepping into the east wing. He died 3 days later. And the townspeople? They stopped speaking of it altogether. Children were warned never to walk past the wrought iron gates after dark. Dogs refused to enter the yard. Lamps flickered when carriages passed by. And on stormy nights, passers-by claimed they heard piano notes drifting from the parlor, always the same note, C-sharp. Annabelle's key. In 1897, a New York professor of comparative religions, Dr. Edwin Langford, arrived in New Orleans. He'd spent years researching esoteric cults and ritual architecture. He claimed to have traced several known ley line crossings to the very plot where the Beaumont estate stood. According to his calculations, the house was built atop a junction of geomantic significance, a convergence of energy once worshipped by the Choctaw, then later repurposed by colonial occultists. Dr. Langford believed the house itself was a machine, not for living, but for summoning. His expedition inside was brief. He entered with 2 assistants, torches, and a leather satchel of holy texts. Only 1 assistant returned. Speechless, shaking, covered in what he claimed was salt that moved like worms. Dr. Langford's notes were found scattered across the lawn days later, burned, slashed, but partially legible. Among them, 1 sentence repeated dozens of times. "She guards the gate now." Local legend says Dr. Langford never left New Orleans. Some say he lives in the catacombs beneath St. Louis Cemetery No. 1, drawing circles in the stone. Others say he was taken, body and mind, into whatever the Beaumonts had away, Kenneth. But what terrified the city most wasn't what happened in the house. It was what happened outside. Starting in the winter of 1898, children from surrounding neighborhoods began disappearing, not in groups, one by one, always 7 days apart, always on a Thursday. Their shoes were found lined up at their doorsteps, untouched, polished, waiting, as if they'd walked away willingly. The city launched investigations. Mass panic followed, but no bodies were found, only symbols, etched into walls, sidewalks, even trees, the same serpent sigil from Lucien's journals, and above one child's crib, in chalk, "The gate demands heirs." By the dawn of the new century, the name Beaumont had vanished from polite society, not by scandal, but by silence. Records were sealed, letters destroyed, portraits removed from city halls and museums. Even Lucien's donation plaques were quietly replaced with anonymous inscriptions. It was as if the world had conspired to forget them, but the gate remembered. In 1904, a man named Samuel Creed, a railroad baron and spiritualist from Pittsburgh, purchased the abandoned estate. He'd heard whispers of its energetic potential from an underground circle of elite occultists in Vienna. They referred to it simply as the vessel. He arrived with 20 men, not laborers, not masons, but initiates. They wore matching black robes and bore tattoos of a snake swallowing its tail, the Ouroboros, yes, but inverted, its eye pierced by a dagger. They spoke in an invented tongue. Creed's stated purpose was to awaken the house. Over the next 6 months, construction sounds echoed through the property, but nothing was ever built, only dug. Tunnels beneath the cellar, chambers beneath the garden, circles beneath the master bedroom. Witnesses claimed they saw men pouring silver dust into the earth. Others heard what sounded like singing, except no words, just humming, deep, rhythmic, and always at twilight. Then came the thunder. Even on clear days, clouds would form above the mansion around 4 p.m., and each time, a single, deafening thunderclap. Locals began calling it the Beaumont Hour, and then it stopped. One morning in August, all activity ceased. No lights, no workers, no sign of Samuel Creed. The mansion had gone dark again. Curiosity hunters and mystics flocked to the site in secret. One, a defrocked priest turned medium, reportedly entered the east wing and emerged 3 hours later, aged 20 years and completely white-haired. He died that night. Mere turn, uttering the phrase, "She walked backward through the veil." And in 1906, a letter surfaced, found in the archives of Tulane University's rare books room, tucked inside a book of Celtic funeral rites. The handwriting was unmistakably Lucien Beaumont's, but dated 32 years after his disappearance. The message was simple. Annabelle is not dead. She is not living either. The door must stay closed. The key was never mine. Some said it was a forgery, others a cruel joke, but those who studied the house, they believed, because by then the garden had begun to grow again, with flowers no botanist could name. In 1913, something changed. A journalist named Marion Hale, writing for the Boston Courier, stumbled across the Annabelle Beaumont story while researching a separate piece on forgotten southern estates. She was young, skeptical, and famously unafraid of superstition. Her angle exposed the madness behind America's haunted mansions. She arrived in New Orleans with a camera, notebook, and a promise to her editor. "I'll be back in 3 days with nothing but rat droppings and bad wallpaper." She was never seen again, but her camera was. A local boy found it at the gates of the Beaumont estate a week later, propped against the rusted lion statue, lens cracked, but film intact. The courier rushed to develop it. What they saw was never published. Frame 1, Marion standing on the front porch smiling. Frame 2, the entry hall, elegant decay, dust in shafts of sunlight. Frame 3, a mirror in the east wing showing Marion's reflection, and something else behind her, a blur, a woman in green. Frame 4, Marion running. Frame 5, darkness. Frame 6, a basement stone wall carved with unfamiliar runes and a blood-stained handprint. The courier refused to release the photos, but one assistant kept copies, and decades later he described what the final frame showed, a reflection in broken glass. Not of Marion, but of Annabelle. Still young, still wearing the locket, and standing behind the camera. That same year, a fire broke out in the French Quarter, blocks away. Yet wind carried embers toward the Beaumont property. Not a single spark touched it. It was as if something, or someone, refused to let it burn. City officials finally acted. They erected iron fencing topped with barbed wire, declared the site condemned, posted guards, but each lasted only a few nights. One officer reported waking up in the driveway miles from his post with the word "witness" etched into his forearm. He quit the next morning. By the time World War I began, the Beaumont estate had passed beyond urban legend and into something deeper, something whispered about in secret societies, college basements, and esoteric texts banned by the Vatican. The story was no longer, what happened to Annabelle Beaumont? It was, why is she still here? And more chilling, what is she guarding? In 1922, nearly 50 years after Annabelle Beaumont vanished, a curious event occurred, one that made even hardened skeptics shudder. A girl was born at Charity Hospital in New Orleans. Her mother, a Creole woman named Josephine Delarue, swore she had never been with a man. She claimed the pregnancy came after a vivid dream, a woman in a green dress whispering in her ear, "Heir of the gate, seed of silence." The doctors, though confused, documented the birth as a natural anomaly, but the child was anything but natural. She never cried. Her eyes were grey, not the grey of overcast skies, but metallic, like polished steel, and by age 2, she could speak Latin. Word of the miracle child spread through back channels. Occult groups, Rosicrucians, Theosophists. They came from Europe, India, even Egypt, each hoping to see, touch, use her. But Josephine refused. She moved her daughter, Celine, to a convent outside Baton Rouge, hoping to hide her from the world. It didn't work. By 1930, Celine had vanished from the convent. The only clue left behind was a drawing in charcoal, a massive door covered in serpent sigils beneath an arch that read in crude Latin, "Porta Custodita," the guarded gate. That same year, strange phenomena returned to the Beaumont estate. People in the Garden District claimed they heard a child's laughter at night. Residents found chalk symbols drawn on their walls. Several women reported waking with fresh bruises on their wrists, shaped like hands far too small to be an adult's. One man, a historian from Tulane, began obsessively writing about the Beaumonts. He published a private manuscript titled "The Lineage of the Veil." His theory, that Lucien had succeeded, not in bringing Annabelle back, but in creating a bridge between this world and the next, a genetic bridge, that Celine was the result, not of immaculate conception, but of a pact, a blood covenant that tied her to the estate, and whatever lay beneath it. The historian disappeared 3 weeks after mailing his manuscript to the Library of Congress. His body was never found, but the manuscript, it survived, and on its final page was scrawled a phrase, written in what looked like ash. She waits for the key to turn, not to escape, but to finish the opening. By 1937, whispers of the Beaumont estate reached the ears of Aleister Crowley, the infamous occultist and self-declared Great Beast. Crowley, deep into his American tour of secret lodges and hidden temples, claimed in a private letter to a disciple, There is a house in New Orleans, not built, but grown. It hides a womb of ancient keys. I have seen her. She knows me. Most dismissed it as one of Crowley's drug-fueled rants. But records show he did indeed travel to New Orleans that autumn, under an assumed name, and rented a townhouse just 3 blocks from the Beaumont property. For 5 nights, he did not sleep. Neighbors said they saw candles flickering in every window of his flat. Strange figures in hooded robes entered and exited at dusk and dawn. On the 6th day, Crowley was found unconscious in the middle of Chartres Street, barefoot and babbling. The only phrase witnesses could understand: "She is the door and the lock and the silence between." He fled the city that night. The next morning, a massive crack appeared in the earth behind the Beaumont mansion, a jagged rupture 6 feet wide extending from the garden to the edge of the old carriage house. No earthquake had been recorded, no shifting of soil, just a wound in the land, as if something beneath had stirred or reached. Geologists were brought in. They refused to enter the property. One student from Tulane dared to measure the fissure. He dropped a weighted string to gauge the depth. It never hit bottom. The string ran out at 800 feet, and then he began to scream. He claimed he saw something down there, not eyes, not a shape, but a sound made visible. A hum that shimmered in the dark, like oil on water. It spoke not in words, but in memory, his memories, twisted, inverted, and played back in the voice of someone he'd never met. A woman, calm, English, soft, saying only, "You brought me back wrong." He was institutionalized 2 days later, and while his body aged normally, his hair never grew again. To this day the crack remains, hidden beneath ivy and rotting leaves. Locals avoid the place, tour guides refuse to mention it, and yet, every decade or so, someone still tries to find out what lies beneath. They all come with different reasons: fame, closure, power. They all leave with the same thing: silence. In 1946, just after the end of World War II, a team of U.S. military intelligence officers quietly arrived in New Orleans under orders labeled Project Silver Tongue. The mission was classified at the highest level. Publicly, they were parapsychological researchers following up on Nazi occult experiments. Privately, they were hunting residuals of anomalous architecture. Their destination, the Beaumont estate. At the time, the mansion was overrun with vines, rot, and feral animals, but it was still standing, untouched by demolition crews, immune to decay in strange ways. Soldiers reported doors that opened on their own, clocks that ran backward, and hallways that changed direction. One lieutenant swore that when he entered the upstairs nursery, his dead brother's voice called to him, whispering from beneath the floorboards. Another reported seeing a girl standing inside a mirror, mouthing his name in perfect sync. They set up base inside the house, rigging it with wiretaps, cameras, and vibration sensors. Only one device ever captured anything. At 3:17 a.m. on the 3rd night, an old phonograph in the ballroom, long broken, began playing on its own. The tune? Daisy Bell, but in reverse. As the song played, a tremor shook the West Wing. One soldier, a decorated sergeant named William Rourke, began violently convulsing. When he regained consciousness, he calmly recited a set of coordinates, again and again, in a voice not his own. Those coordinates led to a buried cellar, one no one had known existed. They excavated it. Inside they found 3 things: a woman's shoe, pristine emerald green satin, a child's drawing of the house surrounded by black birds, and in the far corner, a small door, only 4 feet high, made of iron and sealed shut by 12 bolts. Above the door, written in bone ash, a phrase in French: "Elle dort ici, mais rêve là-bas." She sleeps here but dreams over there. What lay beyond that door? We don't know. Because the next morning, the cellar was gone, caved in, buried, as if it had never been opened. The Silver Tongue team was disbanded within the month, all files destroyed, all personnel reassigned, except Rourke. He left the military, moved to Maine, and built a replica of the Beaumont house from memory. right down to the creaking nursery and the ivy-covered iron gate. When neighbors asked why, he only ever answered, "I promised her I'd finish it." 20 years passed. By 1966, the Beaumont estate had become the center of urban legend, a place teenagers dared each other to enter, a site for seances, dares, and graffiti. But none of them ever stayed long. Locals reported lights flickering in upper windows, despite there being no electricity. Some swore they saw a woman in white standing motionless on the balcony, staring out at nothing. A few claimed she wept. That same year, Lavinia Gray, a Columbia-trained folklorist, arrived in New Orleans to document disappearing oral traditions. What she found instead was a living myth. Drawn by repeated references to a sleeping lady of the house, Lavinia turned her attention to the Beaumont legend. She scoured newspaper archives, church records, death registries, and in doing so, uncovered something no one had noticed before. There had been 7 women who vanished within a 1-mile radius of the Beaumont property, all between 1887 and 1902. All of them resembled Annabelle. Same height, same hair color, same facial structure. A few were seamstresses, one a librarian. All unmarried, all without family, all recorded as having wandered off. No investigation was ever launched, no bodies found, no follow-up. And most damning of all, their names. Each bore some variation of the name Annabelle, Annabelle, Annabella, Belle Anna, Annabelle. Variations that seemed innocent at first, but Lavinia noticed that the initials on the Beaumont ledger, still preserved in the Historical Society's archives, matched every single one. It wasn't just that Annabelle disappeared, it was as if she was multiplied, or perhaps repeated. In Lavinia's journal, recovered years later by her niece, she wrote, "The house does not trap souls, it recycles them, it wears them like clothing." She believed the Beaumont estate wasn't haunted in the traditional sense, it was a living archive, a container for a consciousness that moved sideways through time, attaching itself to any vessel that resembled the original. Lavinia stayed in New Orleans for 6 months. On her last night, she left a message on her niece's answering machine. "I've heard her now. She's in the walls, in the floors, in the mirror when I pass. I think she needs someone to finish her sentence." She was never heard from again. Her hotel room was found empty, but on the bathroom mirror, written in condensation, 5 words appeared, despite the mirror being dry. "Don't look behind the nursery." In 1981, a demolition order was finally issued for the Beaumont estate. The city, eager to erase what had become a magnet for thrill-seekers and tragedy, hired a private contractor with no ties to New Orleans, a man named Daniel Mercer from Chicago. He brought in his crew on a clear spring morning, no fanfare, no media, just a job. But by the 3rd day, Mercer filed an official request to halt demolition. His reason? He claimed the house was actively resisting destruction. First, the machinery failed, multiple times. Hydraulic lines ruptured without warning, bulldozers stalled with no mechanical explanation. A crane operator fell unconscious after saying he saw someone standing on the 3rd-floor balcony, even though the floors above the 2nd had already collapsed. One of the workers, a 27-year-old named Jeff Quinn, walked into the house alone at night. He had taken a bet, said he'd retrieve something from the master bedroom, a piece of the past. He never came out. They found him the next morning asleep in the nursery, arms folded like a child, smiling. When shaken awake, he screamed and refused to speak for 2 days. When he finally did, he repeated the same phrase again and again in a flat, unrecognizable tone. She found her face. Now she needs a name. After that, Mercer withdrew his crew and abandoned the contract. The city threatened legal action. He didn't care. In a letter to his sister, he wrote, "It isn't just haunted, it's unfinished, and it wants to stay that way." Word spread. That summer, occultists, mystics, and rogue historians began arriving in New Orleans, whispering that the Beaumont estate was a veiled anchor, a point in space where timelines blurred, where the ghost of a woman searching for herself held reality in suspension. Some even claimed that Annabelle Beaumont never existed at all, not as one woman, but as an idea projected so powerfully into the fabric of time that she began to wear other people like costumes. And the house? Not a prison, but a theater. Each soul who entered, each version of Annabelle repeated, rehearsed, rewritten, as if some cosmic playwright were trying to perfect a story again and again through different actors, different names, different centuries. And the audience? Us, watching, wondering, forgetting, until something calls us back. By the late 1990s, the Beaumont estate was once again quiet. Fenced off, forgotten by the city, overtaken by creeping vines and the slow rot of time, but not truly abandoned. Strange visitors still came, always alone, always at dusk. Some claimed to be artists, others dream researchers. One man called himself a memory cartographer, but what happened in 2003 would force the world to look again. A team of architecture students from Tulane University received a grant to document historical structures in danger of collapse. Beaumont was last on their list. They didn't believe in ghosts, just mold and bad plumbing. They entered on a Thursday morning, equipped with high-resolution cameras, floor scanners, and digital mapping tools. Their goal? Reconstruct the house virtually, beam by beam, and present it as a 3D exhibit. For once, Annabelle's story would be told through angles, not whispers. But when the scans came back, something was wrong. The nursery didn't exist. Not in the data, not in the structure, not in the architectural records. To the eye, it was there. Peeling wallpaper, a cradle, a window that no longer opened, but on every scan, LiDAR, heat map, even sonar, it was as if the room wasn't there. Even stranger, every time they tried to map the third floor, the blueprints shifted. Doors appeared where none had been. A hallway stretched longer than the house physically allowed. On one scan, a staircase spiraled upward into blackness with no end. The data corrupted. The project was scrapped. But one student, Eli Navarro, obsessed and sleep-deprived, kept digging. He began to overlay the maps with historical census records, fire insurance documents, and water table charts dating back to the 1800s. He discovered something chilling. Every major architectural shift in the house, every wing added, every stairwell moved, aligned perfectly with the dates of the known disappearances. As if the house was rearranging itself to hide something. Or someone. In his final blog post, Eli wrote, "It's not a haunting, it's a loop, a performance space, a ritual. The house changes not to confuse us, but to protect her. Annabelle is not the ghost, she's the author, and we're all just scenes in her manuscript." Eli disappeared a week later. His laptop was found open. On the screen, a blank floor plan labeled in red letters. Act 5. The Return. By 2010, the story of Annabelle Beaumont had drifted from folklore into the digital underground, whispered across forums, dissected in cryptid podcasts, and shared in grainy YouTube videos titled "The House That Writes Itself," but most of the world still didn't know. Until the night of March 2nd, 2012, when a live stream changed everything. An urban exploration channel called Dark Path 87, run by two thrill-seekers from Baton Rouge, decided to break into the Beaumont estate. Their channel had a small following, mostly teenagers craving scares and jump cuts. Nothing serious, just another haunted house video. They entered through a gap in the north fence. What they didn't know was that March 2nd was the anniversary of Annabelle's wedding. The stream began normally. Jokes, flashlight banter, creaking floorboards. Thousands watched live as they made their way through the front hall, the dining room, the piano parlor. They mocked the demon mirror in the east wing and even staged a fake possession scene. But then, the mood shifted. The cameras, both body-mounted and handheld, began glitching. Time codes skipped. One viewer noticed something strange. The explorers started appearing in places they hadn't filmed yet. At 47 minutes in, one of the streamers, Zach, turned a corner and gasped. Before him was the nursery, but not in decay. It was restored. Lace curtains billowed, a mobile spun gently, the wallpaper was pristine, pale blue with gold stars. A music box played something faint, familiar, green sleeves. Then came the voice, soft, female, British. It whispered, "Are you ready for your lines?" The chat exploded. Trolls laughed, fans begged for more. But Zach wasn't laughing. He backed away slowly. The music box stopped. The nursery door closed behind him, and from the other camera, held by the second explorer, you could see it, a woman standing at the window. She wasn't blurry, she wasn't transparent. She was watching the camera as if she knew exactly where to look. Then the stream cut to black. When the feed returned, the two were outside, crying, confused, missing time. They had lost nearly 4 hours. Neither could remember leaving the house. But the most disturbing part? When the footage was reviewed frame by frame, a single image appeared for just 1/30th of a second. It showed a handwritten script page, old, stained, burned at the edges. The words were typed. Scene 27, the audience begins to believe. Enter, you. After the live stream incident of 2012, the Beaumont house was no longer just a local legend. It became an obsession. Digital archaeologists downloaded every frame of the Dark Path 87 video before it was taken down. Linguists analyzed the fleeting voice from the nursery. Experts in Victorian literature scoured the frame that flashed the script page. But the most unsettling detail came from a typography analyst, yes, those exist, who confirmed that the typeface on the burned page was an experimental script machine manufactured in 1872, exclusive to a British printing press that only produced one known model. That model had been commissioned by none other than Nathaniel Blackstone, a stage director linked to occultist groups in 19th century London. Annabelle's father. You see, Nathaniel Blackstone wasn't just a wealthy patron of the arts. He was rumored to be part of a secret society known as the Echo Circle, a cabal of artists, dramatists, and mystics who believed reality could be rewritten through performance. Their core belief? That certain emotions expressed in ritualistic theater could manipulate time and space, binding a moment in eternity. And Annabelle? She wasn't merely a victim of a mysterious disappearance. She was the key player in their final performance. A final act that never ended, because it wasn't meant to. You see, the Beaumont house wasn't just a residence. It was a theater, veiled as a home, a stage for looping emotion, grief, betrayal, love denied, and the more people watched, the stronger the loop became. In 2015, a woman named Dr. Evelyn Rush, a cognitive psychologist at Tulane, published a paper she later retracted. It claimed the house projected psychic architecture, reshaping rooms based on the observer's unconscious mind, a kind of architectural empathy. The house read you, responded to you, and in return, it rewrote you. She later told a colleague she dreamed of Annabelle nightly, not as a ghost, but as a director, giving her notes, whispering, "Act natural, we're almost to the climax." 1 year later, Dr. Rush vanished from a locked hotel room in Savannah. No forced entry, just a single line scrawled on her bathroom mirror. Curtain rises at midnight. To this day, no one knows who wrote it. But on every anniversary of Annabelle's wedding, viewers say the Dark Path 87 stream mysteriously goes live again. No hosts, no chat, just the nursery. Waiting. The Beaumont case had now spilled into academia, pop culture, and underground occult forums, and yet no official investigation had ever been reopened. Why? Because the house was declared legally empty and non-livable by the city of New Orleans as early as 1929. After the Great Flood, it was quietly red-zoned, and its deeds were transferred to a private trust. No taxes, no sales, no owners, just a name on the records. A. Blackstone Repertory, a theater company that hadn't staged a show in over 130 years. Yet somehow, it still received funding, small donations, anonymous grants, payments from shell foundations. One such contribution, $10,000, came from a Swiss account tied to a man named Mathis Vorel, a descendant of Franz Vorel. a German spiritualist who was present in New Orleans in 1874, on the night Annabelle vanished. Researchers trying to trace the trust were blocked at every legal corner. The deeper they went, the more the names looped. Blackstone, Beaumont, Vorel, Marchand, Rush. As if the same characters were recast through generations, playing the same drama over and over. And it gets stranger. A musicologist from Cambridge, Dr. Thomas Ellery, discovered something chilling, a fragment of music. The same Greensleeves melody heard in the live stream appears encoded in 4 separate operas across 3 centuries, each time under a different name. La Dernière Scène, 1791, The Mirror's Bride, 1843, Spettro del Cuore, 1906, and an unfinished modern composition known only as Annabelle's Room, 2011. Every piece shares the same final line in the libretto. She never left, she simply forgot she was on stage. Ellery was found dead 3 weeks after publishing this discovery, ruled a stroke, though friends say he'd been in perfect health. On his desk, a sheet of music torn from his notebook, notes scratched violently, blood on the paper, A, and 3 words circled in red. You looked away. But here's where it becomes nearly unbearable. In 2018, an independent filmmaker managed to sneak into the Beaumont property. No live stream, just handheld. He never released the footage, not out of fear, but because the footage was blank, not static, not darkness, just white. Like the reel had been overexposed before filming even began. But the audio, it remained intact. Faint footsteps, a turning doorknob, a voice, low and steady, whispering, "Lights up. Act 2 begins now." By now, those who had truly followed the Annabelle Beaumont case weren't looking for a killer. They weren't even sure a crime had been committed. What they were beginning to understand was far more unsettling. Annabelle hadn't been taken. She had been absorbed into something bigger, older, and intentionally designed to blur the line between observer and performer. A psychic stage with no fourth wall, because you, the viewer, were always meant to be part of it. A retired FBI analyst, Malcolm Franks, once reviewed the case in a private symposium. He compared the Beaumont house to an emotional particle collider. His words, "It's like a theater that uses grief and memory as fuel, compressing tragedy into spectacle until the spectacle becomes reality." He wasn't being poetic, he meant it literally. His theory: the Beaumont residence, like certain temples or ancient ritual grounds, had been architected to attract unresolved energy, unfulfilled desire, betrayal, mourning, and trap it in feedback loops using mirrors, acoustics, and symbolically loaded design elements. What was once just a family's home became a vessel, a lens, and through that lens, Annabelle's disappearance became an eternal moment, forever amplified, never concluded. Every new eye watching the Dark Path 87 footage, every article written, every script, every video, every whisper, it all feeds the stage. And Annabelle, she doesn't haunt the house. She directs it. She's the conductor behind the curtain, rewriting roles, guiding newcomers through the beats of a script that has no final page. And perhaps that's why new patterns began to emerge. In different parts of the world, replica disappearances with eerie similarities. A young woman vanishing from a locked theater in Vienna. A single chair left on stage with her name engraved underneath. A child in Buenos Aires waking from a doctor, speaking perfect English, quoting a line from Annabelle's Room. An actor in Toronto collapsing mid-performance, whispering, "Tell her I remembered my cue." Every incident seemingly disconnected, until you look at the dates. All occurred on October the 14th, Annabelle's wedding anniversary. One thread, one timeline, one stage. We are no longer observers of a disappearance. We are participants in its preservation. By speaking her name, by listening to this story, you too have stepped onto the stage. And somewhere, maybe even now, she's writing your lines. After nearly 150 years, the Beaumont case should be dust in the archives. a sad curiosity buried beneath wars, inventions, revolutions. But it refuses to stay buried, because the Beaumont story is no longer just about Annabelle. It's about a mechanism, a structure, a hidden ritual encoded into architecture, time, and story, one that activates whenever someone pays attention. That's why some researchers believe the house isn't haunted. It's hungry. It craves retellings, reenactments, emotion, YouTube comments, Reddit threads, podcasts, urban explorers, filmmakers, all unknowing actors stepping onto a stage with no exit script. And each time her name is spoken, it echoes back, not into the past, but forward, into new roles waiting to be filled. Some theorists call this a narrative trap, a mimetic phenomenon where certain stories don't want to be solved. They want to be felt, experienced, relived, again and again, because solving the mystery ends the story. And stories like Annabelle's are designed to prevent closure. Let me explain. A former sound engineer named Reuben Case claimed to have isolated strange frequencies hidden in the Dark Path 87 audio. Using spectral analysis, he filtered the room tone from the last 14 seconds. What he found was impossible. The ambient hum, thought to be electrical, was actually a multi-layered voice signal, slowed beyond human recognition. When compressed and sped up, it formed a coherent sentence. The curtain never fell. You're just waiting in the dark. Shortly after publishing these findings, Reuben disappeared during a live QA. Viewers say his camera froze, then glitched. For 3 frames, and 3 frames only, the image of a woman in a 19th century gown appeared behind him. She was not part of the stream, not in the room, not in the code. But facial recognition software picked up a 94% match to Anna Belle Beaumont's wedding photo. Was it a prank, a hoax, a haunting? Or is Annabelle's story now so deeply embedded in our digital world that she's migrating, uploading herself, fragment by fragment, through every listener's attention? And if that's true, then maybe it's already too late to stop it, because you're not just hearing this story, you're rehearsing it, and the script is adapting to fit you. By the winter of 2024, the Beaumont case, long cold, long mythologized, experienced a terrifying resurgence. It started small. A TikTok creator posted a reenactment of Annabelle's final known moments based on public transcripts. It went viral, gathering millions of views in days. But here's the part that wasn't publicized. The actress who portrayed Annabelle began receiving handwritten letters mailed with no return address. Each was written in 19th century cursive. Each contained stage directions. Exit right on hesitation. Pause before remembering. Cry on the second knock. She thought it was a fan, until she received a letter that simply read, "You forgot the smile." And enclosed was a photo of her asleep in her apartment. She quit acting, deleted her accounts, moved cities. But 2 weeks later, at a community theater in Providence, a replacement actress collapsed on stage, whispering a single word, "Annabelle." The house lights cut out instantly. When they returned, no one on stage could remember rehearsing the scene they had just performed. And every camera malfunctioned. The footage they managed to salvage, 17 minutes of static, except for the sound of slow footsteps on an empty wooden floor. Click, 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 stop. Then, a faint voice, as though whispered directly into the mic. "She's watching now." Experts tried to explain it as mass suggestion, performance psychology, post-hypnotic states induced by method acting, but these theories crumbled when audience members started experiencing symptoms too. Disorientation, memory loss, nightmares, missing time. One man woke up in the alley behind the theater, clutching a prop ring from the show, a replica of Annabelle's wedding band. It was warm. That same night, his wife received a voicemail. It was just 3 seconds long. A woman's voice, breathy, trembling. "He doesn't love you anymore." The number was traced. It had once belonged to Annabelle Beaumont, listed under her maiden name in the 1870 New Orleans registry. Impossible. Or is it? The question is no longer, what happened to Annabelle? The question is, what part of her are we letting in? And once you let her in, once the performance begins, you no longer decide when the curtain falls. You might think the terror ends there. That a few cursed plays, strange messages, and disappearing actors are the whole story, but they're not. Because in late 2024, something began spreading, quietly, invisibly, through forums, group chats, and encrypted Discord servers. Not a ghost, a script, an anonymous file titled Annabelle's Lines, V1.0. It looked innocent, just a PDF of old dialogue, some period-accurate language, stage directions, but those who downloaded and read it aloud reported disturbing after effects. A high school drama student in Missouri found the file on Reddit. He thought it was a joke. He read one scene during rehearsal, a passage about Annabelle standing at the top of a staircase, waiting for someone who never comes. Later that night, he was found sleepwalking on his roof, murmuring, he promised he'd return by spring. When his parents tried to wake him, he screamed, in a woman's voice. He had no memory of any of it. Another case emerged from Dublin. A university student recorded himself reciting Annabelle's lines for a YouTube horror challenge. Midway through the video, his camera glitch freezes on one frame, a black shape behind him in the mirror, long veil, pale face, hands folded. But when he turned around, nothing. That video has since been deleted, except copies still surface mysteriously every few months on random servers, even on devices never connected to the original post. Investigators call it file drift, but no one can explain why this particular script keeps returning or why the file name keeps updating. From Annabelle's Lines, V1.0 to V2.3 to V4.7, final rehearsal. Some versions include added lines, never written by the uploader, lines like, "They're listening now, keep your eyes down. Only one may leave the stage. She will take your place when the lights go out. What scares X? Perts most is not the text, it's the metadata. Every version of the file, no matter how it's shared, lists the same last editor, A. Beaumont, and the timestamp. March 19th, 1874, 11:59 p.m. 1 minute before she vanished. So maybe Annabelle never died. Maybe she just changed mediums. From flesh to story, from voice to script, and now to you. Because if you've listened this far, you've already read the first page. After the file, after the plays, after the unexplained voices and visions, something even stranger began to happen. People started dreaming about a theater. Not one they had visited, not one that existed. Always the same. A small Victorian playhouse surrounded by fog, velvet seats, gas lamps, a single stage. The curtain is always half raised, and someone, or something, is always waiting in the wings. The dream comes with rules. You're alone. The play has already started, and no matter what you do, you cannot leave. One man, a philosophy professor from Vienna, kept a journal of these dreams. He dreamt of the theater every night for 13 days. Each time, the dream progressed a little further. Night 1. I find myself in the front row. Empty theater. Music plays softly like an old music box. Night 5. A woman steps on stage. Veil, black dress. She looks into the audience and says my name. Night 9. I look down and see a script in my lap. My name is listed as the next character to speak. By night 13, he never woke up. His wife found him lifeless in bed, eyes open, lips moving slightly. When they pressed a stethoscope to his chest, they heard a faint clapping. The coroner ruled it a natural death, but the notebook was never released to the public. Only excerpts. One page simply said, "The curtain will never fall, it only waits." Across continents, similar dreams surfaced. A girl in Manila, a retired nurse in Manchester, a former FBI linguist in Baltimore. all describing the same theater, the same woman, the same final line. It ends with you, but begins again with them. What is this place? A pocket of consciousness? A psychic echo? A spiritual trap? Or something much older? A stage built not for actors, but for souls. Souls that become characters. Characters that forget they were ever real. And you, the listener, the viewer, the curious mind, are already in the theater. You've already opened the program. You've read your line. And behind you, if you listen closely, you can hear the creak of the back row. A seat just lowered itself. Someone has arrived, and she's not here to watch. She's here to continue the story. There's a reason this story refuses to die. It's not just the mystery of Annabelle Beaumont. It's not just the missing body, the cursed script, the haunted dreams. It's because this was never about a single woman. This was a test run. In 1874, the elite didn't just lose a millionaire's wife. They created something. A ritual buried inside art. An experiment in narrative possession. In turning emotion, memory, and trauma into a repeating loop that feeds something unseen. They knew that plays outlive people, that fiction spreads faster than fact, and that the human mind is most vulnerable when it believes it's only being entertained. Annabelle's story wasn't meant to be solved. It was meant to be rehearsed, over and over, across generations. Because somewhere, beneath the mansion, the city, the timeline itself, something still listens for her name. And when enough people speak it, Annabelle. When enough people believe in her pain, her betrayal, her return, she materializes again. Not as a ghost, not as a woman, but as a narrative virus, one that rewrites reality just enough to open a door. And what steps through that door? That's what terrified even the researchers who tried to stop it. In 1993, a classified Vatican report surfaced in underground archives. It described synthetic hauntings, patterns of thought and sound that could generate phenomena in the real world. One file was redacted nearly in full, except for a single handwritten note scrawled in Latin, Verba viva, scena aeternum. Words live, the stage is eternal. You see, when you listen to this story, you're not just consuming content, you're volunteering. Not for a role, but for a transformation. Because everyone who hears Annabelle's name becomes part of her next act. You, me, everyone watching this, we are now cast members. The lights are rising. The curtain is lifting. And somewhere, deep in the shadow of your screen, she is watching, waiting for your next line. Are you ready? What does it mean to be written into a story that was never yours? To feel your thoughts twist into dialogue, to hear your dreams echo someone else's memories. This is what began happening to those who researched Annabelle's case too deeply. Historians, archivists, private investigators, they all reported the same symptoms. Loss of personal memory, invasive imagery, velvet curtains, gas lamps, a stage drenched in fog, a growing conviction that they had been in the play all along. One woman, a linguist from Montreal, began speaking in 19th century idioms. She couldn't stop. A playwright from Dublin rewrote his entire new drama without realizing it, and when staged, the actors fell violently ill during scene 3. But it was Dr. Nathaniel Crane, a neurologist from Boston, who brought the theory into terrifying focus. He published a paper titled Narrative Resonance and the Involuntary Self. In it, he proposed a radical idea that some stories, especially traumatic ones imbued with ritualistic intention, could act as mimetic infections. Not viruses of the body, but of the mind and identity. Dr. Crane wrote, "These stories do not want to be told, they want to be enacted. And when the roles are not filled by actors, they cast the audience instead." He disappeared 2 months after the paper was leaked. His final voicemail, never traced, was left for his daughter. It's not just Annabelle. The theater isn't in New Orleans. It's beneath us all. Every city, every dream, The velvet is just the skin, the stage is the bone. Tell them to stop watching. But we didn't. We watched more. We searched more. We needed to know, and that's exactly what it wanted, because now the story isn't just a file, or a myth, or a play. Now it's embedded in you. And soon, the line between watcher and actor, hunter and haunted, will vanish. You're already standing in the wings. You've already rehearsed this in your sleep. The theater is not made of brick or wood. It is made of attention. And the moment you turned yours to her, you stepped through the curtain. You may not feel it yet, but you've entered a story space older than language. A construct built not with hammers and nails, but with belief. And belief is binding. In 2007, a group of experimental consciousness researchers at Caltech ran an unauthorized trial. They wanted to test whether narrative exposure could produce physiological change, not just fear or adrenaline, but long-term neurological rewiring. They used the Beaumont myth, a scripted version, sanitized, contained. They chose 30 volunteers, only audio exposure, 1 hour. Afterward, 40% experienced lucid dreams featuring a red-haired woman holding a broken mask. One man, a skeptic, quit his job, flew to Louisiana, and tried to dig up the original estate, even though it had long since been demolished. Another, a former opera singer, was hospitalized after a psychotic break. All she could say was, "I heard my cue, but I wasn't ready." These weren't coincidences. This is how the stage finds its cast, by infecting you with possibility, with the idea that this could be true, and then letting your own mind finish the script. The lights flicker in your home, the mirror fogs even when the room is cold. You begin to notice reflections that move half a second too slow, and in those gaps, between perception and logic, something steps through. It wears no name, but you'll recognize it by its voice. Because it will speak your thoughts back to you. But with one crucial difference, it will say what you were about to think. And that's when you'll know. You are no longer watching the play. You are performing it. And just like Annabelle, you won't remember the moment the script took over, only that somehow in the next scene, you already know your lines. There's a peculiar silence that comes just before possession, not demonic, not religious, but something colder, like the soundproof hush of a velvet-draped room where your name is no longer your own. This is where the elite operated, not in backrooms or boardrooms, but in theaters of thought. The 1874 disappearance of Annabelle Beaumont wasn't just a personal tragedy, it was the prototype for a new kind of control. The goal wasn't murder, it was narrative colonization. What if the rich and powerful realized they no longer needed to dominate governments, lands, or money? What if they could simply write reality and let everyone else act it out? Annabelle was the perfect vessel, a woman of class, beauty, and mystery, a story that evoked betrayal, love, madness, a vanishing act with no body, only legend. She was crafted to linger. And from the ashes of her myth, they built what insiders called the fourth script. It wasn't a book. It wasn't a play. It was a modular psychic framework, designed to plug into cultures, languages, and memories across centuries. And once it entered someone, they'd dream of gaslight and ash. They'd hear footsteps behind closed doors. They'd feel the urge to stand center stage, even if they were alone in a room. A Vatican archivist once described it best: the fourth script is not read, it is remembered, by people who've never lived it. You see, the elites don't need to erase the past. They just need to give us better roles to crave, and we fall for it, every time, because we don't want truth. We want drama, mystery, redemption. So they give it to us, dressed in velvet, soaked in candlelight, spoken through voices like Annabelle's, and by the time we realize we're not watching, we're already in Act 3. The audience is gone, the doors are locked, and you're standing center stage, holding a candle. Behind you, footsteps. Ahead, silence. Above you, the script, writing itself. You don't remember walking to the stage, but your feet are there, your breath fogs in the cold air, the velvet curtains sway as if breathing. There's no spotlight, just an ambient glow from nowhere, casting no shadows. And in your hand, a script. It's handwritten, but in your own handwriting. The title page reads, Annabelle, a requiem in 5 acts. But only 4 acts are filled in. The 5th, blank, waiting. And beneath the title, your name, where the playwrights should be. You try to speak, but the words on the page speak you instead. Your lips move. A monologue escapes. Not yours, not hers. Something in between. In the rafters above, the audience stirs. But they are not human. Not anymore. They wear masks, old, cracked, silent, eyes painted on, but watching. And one of them is wearing your face. This is where it always led, not to answers, but to absorption. You didn't follow a mystery. You became it. Just like Annabelle. She was never meant to be found. She was meant to return, through anyone who watched, listened, asked. The Beaumont estate, gone. The Pittsburgh mansion, never existed. These were sets, memory sets, staged across generations to prepare you, the next performer, to carry the myth forward. And as you stare into the faceless crowd, a whisper rises from beneath the floorboards. The curtain never falls, the play never ends. Each seeker becomes the scene. You look down at your script again. The blank 5th act is filling in, live, with every breath you take. And the final line? It's not written yet, because you have to say it. But whatever you choose, will finish the story. For everyone, the silence is unbearable. Your breath is the only sound, shallow, unsteady, as the eyes of 1,000 painted masks wait for your final line. And in that moment, you understand. You were never investigating a disappearance. You were auditioning. This has never been about her story. It was about yours, being rewritten, quietly, invisibly, until your past, your choices, your identity blurred into a role prepared long before you were born. Because this isn't just theater, it's ritual. And rituals require sacrifice. In 1887, they called it madness. In 1921, they called it hysteria. In 1974, schizophrenia. But it was always the same pattern. Those who got too close to the script began to glitch, not mentally, but narratively. People changed their own memories. They remembered scenes that had never happened, words they had never said, wounds they had never received. The stage doesn't just reflect reality, it reconstructs it. And once you enter it fully, you're rewritten too. That's what happened to Annabelle. That's what's happening to you. You hear it now, faint, like a song you once knew. Say the line, say the line. Let the lights go out. You want to step back. You want to tear the script apart. But your body moves forward, slow and obedient, toward the center of the stage. And the masks begin to smile. They've been waiting for this. One final moment, one final word. And as your mouth opens to speak, the lights dim. The audience leans forward, and the velvet curtain begins to fall. But before it closes, a voice, not yours, whispers from deep inside your mind. The role has been accepted. You don't scream, you bow. The applause is deafening. And then, just like Annabelle Beaumont in 1887, you vanish. There's no stage anymore. No lights, no audience, no you, only the echo. It reverberates through something vast and invisible, a space you feel but cannot name, like the inside of a thought that doesn't belong to you. And then, The questions start. They don't come from your voice. They don't come from outside. They rise between the words you've ever spoken, like stains bleeding through paper. Who gave you your name? Who decided what you fear? Who wrote your childhood? You realize the script was never something you held. It held you, from the first storybook, from the lullabies, from the bedtime tales of missing girls, haunted mansions, and tragic heroines. All of it was conditioning. The fourth script didn't need to be delivered. It was embedded. The stories you clung to were the cage. And in a hidden archive, far below ground, lined with dust and iron, there's a black book with no title. Its pages are blank, but they change when touched. They mirror the reader's life, frame by frame, as if your entire existence was being retroactively authored. And inside it now, your chapter appears. The one who looked too closely. It's followed by a note etched in faint ink. He did not vanish. He was absorbed. That's when it hits you. This wasn't about finding Annabelle. It was about creating the next Annabelle. Every few decades they choose one. Someone curious, lonely, brilliant, vulnerable. Someone who asks too many questions. Someone like you. And then they hand them the quill. Because to keep the myth alive, it must evolve. It needs a new voice, a modern touch, a fresh storyteller. You weren't the audience. You weren't even the actor. You were always being groomed to become the author, but not for your own story, for theirs. And now, with every breath you take, the script grows into others, into cities, into timelines not yet born, because the most dangerous magic is not spoken, it is written. You try to put the pen down, but your fingers won't let go. They move like they remember something your mind does not, as if they've written this story before. And maybe they have. Maybe this is your second time through, or your 100th. Maybe Annabelle was just your last name, and you've already forgotten the first. The room around you shifts, not physically, structurally. Books rearrange, walls breathe. The very geometry of reality seems to melt into suggestion. You're inside something that is writing itself moment by moment based on your attention. Whatever you look at changes. Whatever you question opens. Whatever you fear answers. And then you see it. On the desk in front of you, a single crumbling photograph, black and white, blurry, old, but unmistakably you, standing beside a woman in Victorian dress, holding hands, smiling, at the Beaumont estate. Your heart stops. This isn't evidence. This is memory. You weren't just chosen. You were always part of it. In every generation, the myth needs a vessel, a keeper, a writer to stitch the horror into time so it never dies, only evolves. Now, as you stare into the photo, something begins to form behind your reflection. A figure, elegant, pale, her face partly hidden by a silk veil. Annabelle. And she's not angry. She's smiling, gently, as if passing a torch. And behind her, rows of others. Not ghosts, former authors. One for every decade, one for every cycle. And now, you. You can close the book. You can walk away. But the story will only wait for someone else. Or you can accept the role fully and begin writing the next version, the next name, the next disappearance. Not to solve it, but to perpetuate it. The page is blank. Not white, but a deep, endless black. Like a well that doesn't echo, like ink waiting for a name. Yours. You're not holding a pen anymore. You are the pen. Every thought etches into the silence. Every choice becomes canon. Every breath scripts the fate of the next soul who dares to look too closely. You think about ending it, burning the book, breaking the cycle. But that's what the last author tried, and the one before her, and the one before him. They all thought they could escape the narrative, until the story swallowed them. Because this isn't a curse, it's a system, and it feeds on fear, curiosity, and the lie we all believe, that we are the ones telling the story. You're not. You're just the newest voice. A whisper in the dark library of forgotten truths. And somewhere, decades from now, someone will find your name on a brittle envelope. They'll peel it open with trembling fingers, read your final words, and feel the same chill you feel now. Because deep down, they'll recognize the shape of their own fate inside your last line, and they'll ask the same question: was this really just fiction? Then they'll write their answer, and the book will grow again. The mysterious disappearance of the millionaire's wife, Savannah 1887, will vanish into a new version, new place, new date, new myth. Only one truth remains, etched into the final line like blood in vellum. There never was a missing woman, only a missing writer. And now that writer is you. Curtain.